Welcome to Click to Learn More, the show that sounds like clickbait.
But it's actually two dorks.
I'm Dorm.
I'm Liddy.
Today, Liddy,
Dorm.
we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart.
Okay.
And I kind of want to... I actually wrote this part into the script. Heads up, there's a lot of notes here. I don't know what speed we're going to get through them at, but there's a lot of notes.
You told me 7 pages.
I have 7 pages of notes.
You don't ever get to look at my notes again and go, wow, that's a lot of notes. Because this is 7 pages.
To be fair, a lot of mine are like quotes and stuff that we're going to get through quickly. But I want to start by saying I'm not really sure when I got into Mystery Science Theater 3000, which is the topic of the show.
I was going to say.
I was working it in there.
That's what she said.
Because in theory, it's like before my time, right? Which is
for sure.
It stopped. The last episode aired in 99.
Okay.
I was 4.
You weren't born yet. Okay.
And so it was actually rerun on Sci-Fi until like 2006.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine that's when I saw it. Because I remember my parents watching it, and I remember watching it with them. And, like, staying up late and watching it sometimes. Because it used to air at, like, 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I would watch it then. So, even though, like, Netflix has revived the show, we're not going to get into any of that.
Okay.
Basically what happened was the show had its original run, which is what we're going to talk about. And then, in 2016, the original creator, along with a bunch of the writers and stuff, had a crowdfunding campaign.
Yep.
They got it crowdfunded. They made a pilot. Netflix bought the series, and now they're doing another season of the series. So that's basically the Netflix story. It's interesting, but it's not as cool as the way it started, I don't think. So we're going to talk about like the history of MS33K, like how it started. Also, from here on out, if you're not familiar with the acronym, I will be referring to Mystery Science Theater 3000 as MST3K. Or just Mystery Science Theater.
This is that show with the little robots.
Yes.
That would interrupt over top of like
movies.
Horror movies or like any type of movie. My only so I used to watch this as a kid too, back in the 20s.
Yeah.
But the one that stands out in my mind the most is one that's called like Squirm or Slither or something.
Squirm, yeah.
About worms?
Yes.
Okay, so the reason that it stands out in my mind, and I remember this vividly, is because at the very, very end, in the credits, it says filmed in Georgia. Yeah. And one of the little robots says, oh, not in Kentucky? And I got mad. I remember being mad about it as a little kid, and that memory has stuck with me.
That's awesome. So I consider this culturally to be one of the most influential television programs of the past 25 years.
Yeah.
I think that it kind of speaks for itself. We'll get there at the end, but just the way we sort of do things now as a culture, entertainment-wise, with YouTube and Twitch and all that sort of stuff. This was a really early version of a lot of that. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it. I also want to generally praise the work of a couple people for being really, really good sources.
Okay.
Brian Raftery, who wrote for Wired, who I actually emailed and thanked him for writing it. It was very nice. He has a phenomenal long-form article. It's like, I would guess like 5,000 or 6,000 words.
Wow.
Of what he called the oral history of Mystery Science Theater 3000. And it's all just interviews with pretty much anybody who was on the show.
That's super cool.
The creator, the producer who like first greenlit it.
Yeah.
Like the execs from HBO and Comedy Central at the time.
That's really cool.
It's a really good read. And I'll be pulling quotes from that, but I highly recommend that article. And then as far as I could tell, Christopher Cornell, not Chris Cornell, Christopher Cornell and Brian Henry, for their work on, quote, or this is the title, The Almost But Still Not Quite Complete History of MST3K.
Okay.
On a fan site called ms33kinfo.com, but they called themselves Satellite News because they were on the Satellite of Love.
Okay.
They had more of a chronological sort of thing, like this is what happened in 88, this is what happened in 89.
Okay.
But they did match up with the oral history as well as there's a video series actually on just the regular Mystery Science Theater 3000 website.
Oh,
cool. So you can go to ms33k.com. I'm going to get tongue-tied on that a lot. And watch all of that. I watched part 1, which was about 20 minutes, and there were like 3 or 4 parts. So it's long.
Oh, shoot.
But it was almost better as like a fact-checking method to just literally see the people saying this is what happened.
Right.
Because no offense to Christopher or Brian, but it's kind of hard to trust a fan site at the beginning, especially when it's like this sort of like journalistic history of. But all that seemed to line up.
Such a rabid fan base, like
sure.
It's got such a huge fan base behind it too.
A lot of research went in the episode, and it just felt wrong to not credit those people. So I wanted to do that first. So let's get into the premise of what the show is, if you're not familiar with the show. The premise is that a human test subject, first Joel Robinson, played by Joel Hodgson, and then Mike Nelson, played by Mike Nelson, and now Jonah Heston, played by Jonah Ray, have been imprisoned aboard the spacecraft Satellite of Love by mad scientists and their henchmen, collectively called the Mads, which I never heard of them called that, and is forced to watch a series of bad movies in order to find one that will drive the test subject insane. It's a complete ridiculous plot. To keep his sanity, Joel built himself a series of sentient robots, the bots, from parts of aboard the satellite, and who subsequently remain aboard with the other subjects. The bots include Tom Servo, Crow T Robot, Gypsy, who's in charge of running the satellite's operations, and Cambot, the silent recorder of the experiments. Crow and Servo join the human as they watch the film in the satellite's theater and keep him from going mad. The trio frequently comment and wisecrack atop it, a process known as riffing. At regular intervals throughout the movie, the hosts leave the theater and return to the bridge of satellite to perform sketches that they call host segments that satirize the film being watched. So basically, it's you, and Joel kind of describes it this later. It's like sitting in a room with your buddies making fun of a terrible movie.
Yeah.
And so you're just watching them make fun of it.
Yeah.
The process they used for this was really cool. I didn't actually write this down, but I know it. So what they would do is they would watch the movie through. All of the writers would watch through the movie.
Okay.
At first, it was actually just live.
Oh.
Because it was on public access. We'll get there.
So they were just riffing.
Yeah, they just had like one shot and they just sat down and were like, oh, that's funny. And then somebody was like, we should probably have some jokes like written ahead of time.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what led to this process. But by the end, they had 2 or 3 televisions, and the main one was the movie.
Okay.
And the other main focus of a television was the clock. So the way they did it was, hey, and it was all synced together. So it was like, here's this line, pause it. Do we have any jokes here?
Gotcha.
Or can we go back and keep going? Or if somebody would shout something out, be like, all right, let's write the time code down. So then once they got into, not to break the fourth wall a little bit, but once they got into the theater, which was actually them sitting on stools and just cardboard cutouts of chair silhouettes. Yeah, there's actually pictures of them just sitting on a stool. And if you know that going in now when you watch, you can see them like adjust like you wouldn't in a chair. Because they're like just like doing this, but on a stool. Like you can tell it's a stool.
Oh, that's so wild.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. But they would basically just be reading a script and have the clock in front of them, so they could say, okay, 11 minutes 50 seconds. Say this.
Say the funny thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how they did the riffing.
Okay.
It wasn't a. It's so well done that it seems off the cuff.
Yeah,
but it's far from it. There's a whole writer's room, of course, and there's a whole produced thing.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go way back. Like I said, the show ended in 99, but we're going to go way back to like 84-ish.
Wow, okay.
Actually, we're going to go to 82, my bad.
Okay. All right.
So reading about it now, Joel Hodgson seems like the guy from high school who annoyingly never fails in anything he does.
Oh, shoot, okay.
When Joel was a kid, he was glued to television. Quote, this is when there were 3 channels, so I'd watch Farm Report or this terrible polka show called Dairyland Jubilee. If I happened to run into a Godzilla movie or a monster movie of any kind, it was like hitting the lottery, end quote. While Joel was in middle school in St. Paul, Minnesota, he got, similar to me, really into magic.
Oh. Okay.
There was a time.
I do know this about you.
When I really liked doing card magic. Describing his parents as yourselfers, they were extremely supportive of whatever passions he had. Soon, Joel would move from the standard magician's catalogs at the time to building his own trick props.
Okay.
So he started building, like, trick doors and...
That's cool.
Dummy cards and things
child?
like that.
You said was...
I think so. I don't never really
These are things an only child does.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
these are only...
I guess he's doing magic now.
Yeah, these are only child activities.
That's what Joel does. This somewhat naturally led Joel to think he would be a prop magician in high school. Then he thought he'd be a magician comedian.
Okay. So he always wanted to do something funny. Okay.
Yes. He even said that in high school he thought he would be on a cruise ship as a job. Like just doing magician comedy and stuff.
Okay. That's fair.
That segued into a full-time stand-up comedian, and Joel's stars would rise quicker than that flower. I accidentally bought that one time. Joel. It was right when... There's another quote. It was right when stand-ups were becoming famous. If you had chops in your original, you could move really quickly. I got on Letterman within maybe 4 months of relocating to LA.
Oh, shoot.
So he moved to LA right after he graduated high school.
Oh
and within
my God,
4 months
so
was
young.
on Letterman. Yeah.
Wow.
Then I got in on HBO's 1983 Young Comedian special and was a guest on Saturday Night Live.
Oh, dang.
So he talked about, during this stretch, he would be back and forth between Letterman and SNL like once a quarter. So he would like go to both.
So he was getting repetitive showings.
Yeah, and he's like a baby. You can go back and find the clips. He's like a little baby Joel. And he was doing like prop comedy, and that was sort of his thing. But he made really good friends with Jerry Seinfeld.
Okay.
And really bad friends with Gallagher.
Oh,
Gallagher was like his mortal enemy because
No way.
he was doing a stand-up spot in LA at the time, just like at a club. And Gallagher was the guy going on after him. And while Joel was on stage, Gallagher rifled through his props to see how he had made some things without ever asking. And Joel like still isn't forgiving him. Like, he hates Gallagher, even though Gallagher's dead now.
Could you imagine?
Oh, it'd be the worst.
You don't want to make
dude,
a
that's
man.
my stuff.
But you don't want to make a man with a mallet mad at you.
That's true.
You can't go. You can never go to the farmer's market.
You make your head look like a watermelon.
You pick up a watermelon, smashes it as soon as you pick it up.
It's true.
It's not funny, Gallagher.
Come on, Gallagher.
It's assault.
So he said, eventually I got asked to be in a Michael J. Fox sitcom called High School USA.
Okay.
I didn't think it was funny and said no.
No. Okay.
Like, he just outright.
All right.
And this was,
Okay.
keep in mind, this was in the time where, like, getting a sitcom was hitting it big for a stand-up comedian. I mean, this was, like, right before Seinfeld would get Seinfeld. And, like, this was, like, the big get if you were a stand-up. They doubled the money, and that offended me. I realized, oh, that's right, my opinion means nothing in Hollywood.
Oh.
I'd seen other people compromise, and I felt that once you give up on what you wanted to do, you couldn't go back. It was selling out, so I decided to go back to Minneapolis.
Wow, so he went home.
Yeah, so this experience, he like defines as life-changing because he not only turned it down, but this was sort of his wake-up moment of, oh, this whole industry sucks.
Like, I'm nobody.
I hate this.
Yeah, I'm not a person.
Yeah, and he hated like little limited fan interaction he was having, and this sort of limelight just was not for him.
Yeah.
So he, I think wisely, moved back home.
Yeah.
Got out of the toxic environment he was in and started anew. So what he did then...
Props to him for realizing that. And then, props.
That's very good.
I did not mean to do that.
When Hodgson went back to Minnesota, he saw a documentary about Star Wars.
Okay.
They did a thing called kit bashing. Do you know what this is?
No.
I didn't either. They would buy like hundreds of models, like toy models.
Okay.
And sort of make amalgams of them to make their own models.
Okay, so combine them, like Frankenstein them together.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And they call that kit bashing.
Interesting.
Joel was endlessly inspired by this and started frequenting the Salvation Army to find models for sculpture. In the year or so he built robot sculptures for a store aptly just titled Props.
Oh my god.
He estimated he sold 70 or so sculptures. So in a year, 70 sculptures. That's insane. Dude was just like cranking them out.
So just like weird looking sculptures?
Yeah, just like...
do you know what they looked like?
No, I have no idea. But he talked about one in the documentary, or in the video, and he was like, I loved it. I thought it was this weird looking thing, and I didn't want to get rid of it, but then I thought, well, maybe I can make money from it. So I put it in the store, and within a week someone bought it. And was like, okay, I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
And so and he'd always done like some robotic stuff in his stand-ups, but that was very much a natural segue to where the MST3K bots came from.
Do you think that people buying his sculptures was influenced by his work in California before he moved back home?
I don't know.
Do you think maybe he had been like a local celebrity?
And they thought like I want one of Joel's
like,
robots.
Maybe they'll be worth something someday?
It was never really mentioned if that was what was influencing it. I don't know if, I mean, he could have been, because he said he would just like set it in the store and then they would sell it. So I don't even know if it was attached to his name. It wasn't like he had like a booth or anything, but I think it was more like a
I wanted it to stand on its own merits.
Yeah,
I was afraid
cool.
that it was a power play, but
this one lasts long though.
Okay.
Realizing that, quote, not doing comedy for me was like living my life with an arm and my leg tied behind my back, end quote.
Oh.
Hodgson made his official comeback at the Ha Ha Club in Minneapolis that same year.
Ha Ha Club.
Gizmonic gadgetry was now, more than ever, the centerpiece of his act.
Okay.
So that was sort of this, like, his acme, I guess, was Gizmonic.
Gizmonic.
Yes. Gizmonic will come back up. And he referred to the place where he created the gizmos as the Mystery Science Lab.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Then Joel had an idea. He met Jim Mallon, local access TV producer for KTMA, which was a Minneapolis PBS kind of station.
Okay.
And pitched him on 3 or 4 notes on a legal pad. He said he just brought like 2 or 3 drawings on a legal pad, and he's like, I got an idea.
Let me make this. Let me do this.
He basically said the gist of his pitch was this. You know how they have those hosted movies? How about instead of having the host at commercial breaks, we have the host be in the movie? Not a great explanation from Joel.
That's not a very good elevator pitch.
To elaborate, Hodgson said in the interview with Wired, it was an idea that I had tucked away back in my mind since high school. On Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road album, there are illustrations in the liner notes. And for the song I've Seen That Movie Too, it's got little silhouettes watching a movie. I remember going, someone should do a show like that. Run a movie and have these people in silhouettes say stuff. So it all the inspiration came from an Elton John album.
Interesting. Foreshadowing.
Hodgson set the show in outer space and cast himself as Joel, a likable janitor who is blasted into orbit and forced to endure all manner of bad movies. Inspired by the 1972 sci-fi drama Silent Running, in which Bruce Dern plays an outer space botanist who befriends a trio of robots, Joel created and built 3 chatty pals to join him. The pseudo-suave, sarcastic Tom Servo, the big-mouthed, perpetually eye-rolling Crotty robot, and the sweet but appropriately spacey sidekick Gypsy. Though Jim Mallon, the producer, would eventually play Gypsy, in the early season the robots would be voiced by local comedians and MST3K co-stars Josh Weinstein and Tracy... I never know how to say this. I think it's Beaulieu? Beaulieu.
Okay.
Weinstein said that the whole production cycle at KTMA was like 24 hours long. We gathered at the station and Jim would have a couple of movies they'd pull out of the station's library. He'd say, what do you think about this? We watch maybe 10 minutes and go, okay, yeah, that'll do. Trace Below. I learned how... I'm just going to call him Below. It's Below, not Below. Trace Below. I learned how to talk back to movies by reading Mad Magazine.
Oh, okay.
Give you a time and place.
90s.
They were first to not treat film like the reverential art form that Hollywood would like you to believe it is, and they would do it visually and verbally. It was an absolutely brilliant thing for a kid to read that and go, hey, not everything is the way grown-ups say it is.
Yeah.
But in the first season, we basically went in cold without watching the films. If you look at those episodes, they're real hit or miss. It was just off the top of our heads. And then Weinstein again. We eventually realized, hey, this might be funnier if we had jokes in our back pocket. So in the origin of the characters. Below, sorry. As a character, Crow was a wise ass. He was certainly influenced by Groucho Marx, always tilting at some kind of authority. But he started out with a very stilted, robotic kind of approach. We had scripted it so that after every line, Crow would say, yes, Joel Hodgson. No, Joel Hodgson. Like, yes, Will Robinson. No, Will Robinson.
Okay.
It's very hard to generate other voices or impressions in that sort of voice. So it was limiting. Weinstein said, I was inspired to make Tom Servo a smarmy AM radio DJ. He had the incredible inflated opinion of himself and considered himself a ladies' robot.
Ladies' robot. Josh
really is Tom Servo, that's what Joel said. When Josh was 16, he drank single malt scotch and smoked cigars. He was like a 40-year-old man in a 17-year-old body, which is Tom Servo.
Oh my god.
And Crow's like Trace. He can do millions of characters, and he splits the difference between playing cynical and playful. Mallon said, if I channeled anybody for Gypsy, I channeled my mom. She had a heart of gold and always looked to the best of everything and the best of everyone, and when confronted with difficult things, she somewhat lost it. She didn't know how to negotiate when things went poorly. She would be hurt, so Gypsy would be hurt too at times and turn on the other robots for support.
Aww.
Talking about the pilot, the very first episode. The group filmed a very primitive movie sign door sequence, a crude host segment, in which Joel explained that he himself had built the satellite of love and voluntarily blasted into space, which is not what the origin story would become, and a theater segment featuring about a half hour of the 1969 movie The Green Slime. The supporting cast...
Descriptive title.
So good. The supporting cast included a very rough version of Crow, whose name came from a friend of childhood acquaintance of Joel's, an equally rough version of Gypsy, named in remembrance of a pet turtle. Yeah, so cute. Little turtle named Gypsy.
Little turtle pet.
And a proto-Tom Servo character called Beeper, who spoke only in beeps, hence the name, which only Crow could understand.
So he was R2-D2.
He was R2, yeah.
Okay. It was R2-D2 and C-3PO, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they made.
Yep.
Can't do that.
Despite the rough edges, Mallon was able to convince his extremely dubious bosses to let Hodgson give it a try. Hodgson and crew immediately set about refining the product. The group threw together the sets, the first model of the Satellite of Love, and of course the robots. First to be changed was Beeper, whom everybody agreed was a very unsatisfying character. Nobody liked Bieber. Joel was unhappy with it, and Josh wanted to have a larger speaking role in the show. By the first episode, Bieber gained a voice and was renamed Servo after a vending machine they'd spotted in a mall named Servatron.
Oh my god.
Which
Servatron's also very good.
Yeah, which Weinstein later expanded to Tom Servo. Joel admits that the robots were completed during an all-nighter the day before the first episode was shot.
Oh my, so he made them.
Yeah.
Like he actually made them in the show and in real life.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
In fact, Joel once noted that the sleepiness of his character grew out of the fact that he was indeed very sleepy when the first episode was shot, and it just stuck.
Huh. Okay.
The premiere was also rethought for the first episode. In the new version, Joel's character, Joel's character, Joel Robinson, had been a janitor at Gizmonic Institute. There's Gizmonic again. A top-secret scientific lab. As the opening theme song explained, Joel was apparently tricked in some way into getting on board just before Gizmonic launched a rocket ship into space. Now marooned in orbit, the Institute was forcing him to watch bad movies.
Did they ever say why he was being punished personally?
No, I think they just needed to have someone be a test case. Yeah.
Yeah.
There may be a reference someone can remember better than I can, but only one detail remained: what to call the show. Jim Mallon described how it happened several years later. This is what Mallon said. Okay. When the show was to debut on KTMA, we didn't have a title. So I said to Joel, "What do you think?" And without blinking, he said, "Mystery Science Theater 2000."
Huh.
But since we were so close to the year 2000, we decided to shift it up 1,000 years. But years later, Hodgson explained that the number had nothing to do with a date.
Huh.
I thought of it more as a series of numbers, like the HAL 9000 computer or the Galaxy 500.
Oh.
I guess the difference is Arthur C. Clarke and the Ford Motor Company had the vision to pick a number that couldn't be confused with a year. So he himself even admits that. Probably not a great title. Which is funny because it stuck so well that it was a great title.
Yeah.
Over time, the premise evolved further. The team decided that the audiences need to be able to put faces on Joel's anonymous tormentors at Gizmonic Institute. So, in the show's 6th episode, viewers were introduced to 2 Gizmonic scientists, Dr. Clayton Forrester, a name swipe from George Pal's War of the Worlds, which I didn't know.
Okay.
And Dr. Lawrence Earhart. Ballou, already earning a $25 a show pay to play Crow, took on the role of Dr. Forrester, and Weinstein, already on staff as the voice of Servo, played Earnhardt. So,
oh my god, so they played the 2 robots
and the two
bad
villains.
guys.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
The move was a stroke of genius. Ballou and Weinstein dove delightfully into their roles, and Ballou in particular began to hone and refine the subtleties of a character that would charm millions of viewers for years to come. But nobody knew that at the time. Indeed, Ballou seemed to view this $25 gig as a casual affair. On 3 occasions during the season, Ballou was elsewhere when a show was presented, meaning that Crow was absent from the theater and was casually written out of that week's plot.
Oh my god.
Because it was live.
Yeah.
Indeed, one week neither Weinstein nor Ballou were present, and Joel watched the movie alone.
Oh, that's sad.
It's really cute.
Without his little robo-pals.
Early in 1989, 4 episodes in, 2 or 3 Minneapolis area TV viewers had the presence of mind all those years ago to lunge for the VCR and pop in a tape. Those people and others are still doing a land office business selling copies of those tapes to collectors.
Wow, from the very first.
Yeah, I actually saw a collection of all of the films, and they dub this season. It's not even like listed as season 1. Mm-hmm. They view the Comedy Central. We'll get there, but they view the Comedy Central season as season 1, and they just call these the KTMA episodes.
Okay,
which is really cool, and I never knew what that meant until I did this.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I was like, what is KTMA? Like, is that like before? Really cool. Was it after? Like, when did that happen?
That's cool.
So that was when it was still on public access. The show also was different in another way. Instead of trying to wait for fans to create a fan club to the show, the group created one for themselves.
Big mood.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. In every episode, they encouraged fans to write in with letters of support. When they did, their addresses were saved and placed in a database.
Okay.
To cultivate that audience, the group created Satellite News, a free newsletter sent to all those addresses containing bits of comedy and promotional material.
Okay.
Always be hustling.
Yeah, that's it.
But just as the show began to find its feet, a new problem arose. KTMA executives, in an effort to save money and ominously foreshadowing events that would occur years later, decided to cancel MST3K in favor of showing movies on Rift. Not taking the cancellation lying down, the fledgling MST3K fan club wrote an article in the 2nd issue of Satellite News asking fans to contact KTMA and voice their displeasure.
Oh, shoot.
It worked. Fans sent cards and letters to the station, and in short order, KTMA announced that MST3K would continue.
I wonder if this is one of the first examples of, like, a
revival.
fan base, like, getting a show picked back up.
It has to be, right? I mean, like, you got to imagine that KTMA, at the time, it was much harder to gauge who was watching TV.
Yeah.
Especially, like, Nielsen wouldn't have been around. Like, Nielsen wouldn't have applied to public access in a way that they could have easily monitored it quickly.
Yeah.
Because
they probably just thought, we're going to just cut you because it's easier.
Right. We're paying you, and we're just going to put these
We
movies
don't
up
have
anyway.
to pay multiple actors if we can just play a movie we were going to play in the first place.
Right. But what they failed to realize was people were watching it just for the riff. And so I think once they realized, oh shoot, people are actually watching this show on public access at 3 in the day or whenever it was.
Right.
We got to keep it because it's making money for ad revenue. So I think it made sense on everybody's part. It wasn't like we're going to do it out of the goodness of our heart or whatever. It's actually a business move to see like, oh, we have proof. We have actual proof now that people are watching this, and we can show it to advertisers and say, look, they rabidly want it. Throw an ad in there. People are watching it.
We're getting some money.
It's going to make more than if it was just a dead movie. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So Joel and Company did a total of 21 complete shows for KTMA, and copies of 18 of those are available through what they call Misties, which are MST3K fans.
Okay.
On the internet. The original masters of all the shows, rumored at one point to have been destroyed by KTMA, are in Malin's private collection.
Ooh.
And snippets from the never-seen pilot and not available on tape first episode were made part of a scrapbook tape later sold by the fan club.
How cool.
So it's like just like a little moments and stuff.
That's really neat.
Malin said the show was a lot of work. By around March or April of 1989, we're all kind of burned out. And it just happened at the time HBO decided, based on the success of music television, that they could do a comedy television channel.
Okay.
I had no idea that Comedy Central came out of MTV's success.
Yeah, I would have considered MTV to like be side by side Comedy Central,
right?
I wouldn't have thought they were compared in any way.
I think it's interesting too because it's like, oh, Comedy Central was following the model. Like, how did someone get from, oh, well, there's music television.
Yeah,
let's just do it for comedy.
Let's just do a funny channel.
Which at the time HBO was really known for its like stand-up specials and like the young comedian stuff and like doing like those sort of. I forget, like ensemble cast stand-up shows. So it made sense for them to do that, but it's just an interesting thing that they wanted that as their programming.
Yeah.
And they were looking for programming. Went through our tapes and pulled out 7 minutes of the best material we had.
7 minutes, wow.
Yeah. So basically, they got picked up because HBO was thin on what they were going to put on Comedy Central. I think they called it maybe the Comedy Channel at first, but it became Comedy Central.
Gotcha.
And so they were like, yeah, HBO knew Joel from him doing stand-up specials for them.
So he already had a little bit of clout.
Yep, and knew they could trust him. They could put it on a dead hour if they needed to.
Yep.
And they needed stuff, so that's what they got picked up. So Joel said, we weren't very strict about who we hired. They weren't pre-built writers, and that's probably a good thing. So they stayed in... HBO wanted them to move to New York. Okay. They wanted to come to New York, film all the stuff there. That's where we're based, all that stuff.
No, and at this point, is he still...
They're still in Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis, okay.
So they all kind of said, no, if it's happening here.
Yeah.
We have families. Mm-hmm. We have, like at the time, other people, they were working other day jobs. This was just like a side thing.
Yeah.
And so they said, no, if it has to come out of here, it comes out of here. And HBO was like, okay. So kudos to them for saying like,
right,
we want this so badly that do it there, I guess.
Like as opposed to California where they were like, well, we're going to double it. And then he was like, okay, well, I'm going to walk. I wonder like if they had said the same thing, if he would have walked again.
I think it was more the project that he wanted to do and less the financial or the location.
Yeah,
because, I mean, he said like it wasn't funny. Mm-hmm, and I think had it been funny, he would have done it initially.
Yeah.
And of course, this was his baby. We'll get to what happens with his involvement with the show, but it kind of echoes that where it's like if something gets to a point that he doesn't want to do it, he's out.
Okay. That's
sort of his MO.
I mean, I think that's a good point to have.
Though MST3K boasted a remarkably talented writing staff, its real stars were the B movies. From cheapo action flicks like The Puma Man.
The predecessor to Black Panther.
Yeah. To over-the-top sci-fi horror amalgams like Night of the Blood Beast.
Okay, well.
To creepy kids fare like one of my favorite MST3K movies, Merlin's Shop of Mystical Wonders.
Okay.
It's great.
Alright. Is it a kids movie? Like actually a kids movie?
It's like one of those like I'm trying to think of a successful version of this. Like
Harry Potter's uncle.
Lost Boys? Kind of like it's not really a kids movie, but it's kid friendly enough that they could go.
Okay.
It's like a family horror movie, I guess. It's terrible. I think that's what they were going for anyway.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Hodgson said film distributors would do this trick. So the reason they were able to do this, film distributors would do this trick where they'd license you several movies. Half of them might be movies you'd heard of, and half of them were movies that we wanted. The B movies. We didn't want the cocaine. We wanted the baby laxative they put in the cocaine. It's a great quote.
It's terrible.
So I thought this was really cool. So when they would... it's changed now. Now it's basically a buy movie licensing fee. But back in the day, they would just say, all right, we're going to license 20 films to you, including things like, the
Blood Beast.
Casablanca and whatever. But also there's all this filler crap.
But also there's the Blood Beast.
Right, exactly. And so they kind of just took advantage of that situation.
Yeah.
And Comedy Central's like, sure, we'll take your Caddyshack and then give us, Night of the Blood Beast or whatever. And so it actually seemed like... It's funny because you could see someone coming up with the idea for this out of that situation alone.
Yeah.
So the fact that it just kind of retrofit with that makes a whole lot of sense for everybody involved.
It was a win-win at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. The selection process was a fine art. The staff recounts stories of being shown movies with audio and video quality issues, NC-17 films, and films that were just boring. They weren't just looking for bad, they were looking for a certain kind of bad.
Yeah.
Hodgson said, our riffs were never too negative. We were the audience's companion. And people don't want to spend time with assholes.
That's fair.
If you're negative, it may be funny, but not sustainable. So we had a lot of respect for the movies because we had to work with them.
Yeah.
Trace once said a clever thing. The movies are Margaret Dumont, and we're the Marx Brothers. Now, Margaret Dumont, I didn't know who this was, so I did a bit of side research.
Okay.
So, Groucho Marx had, some really big movies. Duck Soup being one of them, and then what is the one with opera in the title? A Night at the Opera, Duck Soup, and Animal Crackers. Those are, his 3 huge movies.
And his favorite meals.
Yes. And A Night at the Opera? That's where he eats them. And so...
He sneaks in his soup and his animal crackers.
Ew, that's a gross... Do you think he puts the animal crackers in the soup?
Without a doubt.
Ugh.
Yeah, duck soup, duck animal crackers.
Oh, he only uses duck animal crackers
He only uses
for
the ducks
soup.
for the soup.
That's very good.
Yeah. He wasn't a great dude. I shouldn't talk bad about a dead man that I don't know. He was probably fine. Oh no, this was in the 40s or something. He's probably terrible.
So Groucho... Everybody in the 40s.
Yeah, everybody was terrible in the 40s.
So Groucho... Margaret Dumont basically worked as Groucho's straight man in a way. So in Duck Soup... I think it was Duck Soup. I get those movies confused because they all have the same plot. But Duck Soup... He was basically somehow became a world leader. And, or a really big thing in this place of Fredonia. It's a fake country.
Okay.
But it's still just, the weirdest thing is it's still just Groucho Marx.
Yeah.
It's...
Looking sounding like...
Yeah, it just, imagine Groucho Marx, and that's how his character is played.
This is the conversation we had earlier about Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, Mark Wahlberg just always plays Mark
It's just
Wahlberg.
always Mark
Groucho
Wahlberg.
Marx always plays Groucho
Will
Marx.
Smith is always Will Smith.
But the weird part is, in this Fredonia... I'm just going to go on this side tangent now. So, in Fredonia, Margaret Dumont was this empress, countess lady.
Okay.
Who was arranging... she had heard of how popular he was and was calling him, emperor and all this kind of stuff. And, she was just the adoring person on his side, but was still playing straight man to his goofs.
Okay.
And that was how it was in Night at the Opera. In Night at the Opera, she was sort of trying to break into society, and he knew some people. But it's always just she was the straight man.
Yeah.
That's what she was in the role. But in the Fredonia stuff, in Duck Soup, they're all dressed like regalia and Hungarian princes and princesses. And it's just Groucho Marx in a suit. In his frumpy suit and tie that ended in a square.
That he showed up there in?
Yeah.
That he got there that day?
I don't understand it. I guess that's part of the comedy. I mean, the lines still hold up. The dialogue's great. But it was just very jarring to go watch that. So I watched that all today because I saw that reference. I was like, I don't know what that's talking about, so I had to learn about that. Do you want to guess what the biggest issue they ran into was?
Ooh, killer bees.
Do you know that there's an actual movie about bees?
I did know that.
Okay, good.
I didn't.
All right. Well, that was very good. It's one of my favorite.
Really?
Yeah,
No,
it's one of my favorite episodes.
I didn't know.
It's about a beekeeper, and there's this weird island, and then like this British pop star it's a weird thing.
Ooh, I've heard of it. A B movie. Now you're getting scared.
Legal was the biggest issue they had. We kind of got off track a little bit. Films often had bizarre ownership claims, especially at this level of quality. From businessmen who owned fertilizer companies.
Yeah, okay, why not?
That's the case in the movie of Manos, The Hands of Fate, which is one of the most notorious riffs that MS2K has done.
Okay.
To, I don't know what this was referring to films that had their rights passed on to grandkids who didn't even know they owned it.
What?
So they just said that happened once. That like
That's so wild.
Some grandchild was like, or they were asking about a movie, and like it was like, no, he owned it, and then it was willed to this grandson, and the grandson was like, what? I own the rights to a movie?
Yeah, what?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Like, had no idea. It was so wild. But when you get like, I think it almost would kind of come back to like old YouTube in a way.
Okay.
Like if you were to take YouTube now and put it in a film setting. Because a lot of it was just like these people just like experimenting with film.
Yeah.
And like dicking around like, I want to make a movie. And that's how it got made. I've got a couple $100,000.
Could you imagine if your grandparent willed you something, one thing, and you weren't allowed to know what it was until you were 18?
I don't think it wasn't they weren't allowed. They just didn't know.
But just like imagine that you weren't allowed to know until you were 18, and you waited till you were 18. You're like, I'm gonna have so much money, can't wait. And you open a box and it's just a note that says you own the rights to a movie about a killer penguin. Could you imagine?
The great farce. Got me one last time, Gramps.
One more time. From the grave.
So good. In a way, the show itself would sometimes imitate the writing process. So if frustration appeared on Joel and later Mike and the robots, that usually meant that doing the film was frustrating, like writing it. They said that, I think it was Trace who was like, it's weird to say that sitting in a room and watching a television all day is grueling work.
Yeah.
He's like, but we were analyzing it by the second.
Right.
So it was exhausting.
Yeah, mentally. Yeah.
I forget which film it was, but they said that one film, they had to break halfway through, go get beers and tequila, drink, and then come back. And they were like, the jokes didn't get any funnier, but our spirits rose.
Yeah.
And we got through it.
Wow.
So it usually, if there was like some part of them just going like, ugh, or like just absolute frustration, then that was what had happened in the writers' room. They were like, you know what? We're these buddies that you're watching films with. We're not assholes. We're just going to be honest.
Yeah.
And put that on.
And if it's miserable for you to watch, like it's miserable for us to try to make it funny.
Sure.
So.
And I mean, you know, they were filming themselves watching a movie. So even though they were using a script, they would still be reacting to something they've seen probably 10 or 20 times at that point.
And you can't fake it.
And you're just like, oh, here's this scene. Like it's even gonna, even if you don't say that, it's still gonna be picked up in the tone of your voice.
You can do that like with movies that you love now.
Sure.
Like if there's always a scene that you're like, oh, okay, you roll your eyes at.
Yeah.
Like you watch it with your friends. That kind of harkens back. That makes sense.
Sure.
That makes sense.
So the frustration would hit a boiling point in 1993.
Okay.
Joel was ready for the show to end.
Oh, it had run its course.
Yeah, he thought it was over.
Okay.
He wanted to do a movie like Star Trek had done years before.
Okay.
And call it a day. He thought,
let's go out on top. Yeah.
That'll be our end. It'll be our swan song. It'll be perfect.
Go out on top.
Which is funny because the show is already like movie length. Because like episodes of MS2K run from like an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how long the movie is.
Because they're watching a movie, yeah.
Granted, I think they edited some of it down, but not a lot. It'll usually pick up exactly where it left off. And so it's kind of weird that they wanted to do an actual movie.
Yeah.
But that was kind of how he wanted to end it.
I wonder what that would have entailed.
Oh, the movie exists.
Oh.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Okay.
Malin and the executives at the different channels wanted to do both.
Oh.
They wanted to make a movie like, yeah, this movie's a great idea, and then we'll just keep making the show. And the movie will be an ad for the show, and the show will be an ad for a movie.
Okay.
For the movie to happen and the show to exist, or that's what they wanted, sorry. The latter would happen, but would see Joel step back from his involvement with the show.
Ooh.
So Joel basically said, all right, you guys want to do that? I'm out. Similar to what he did in LA.
Mm-hmm.
He's known to say if he doesn't like a project, he's not going to keep doing it, which kudos to him.
Yeah. Gotta have your convictions.
Yeah, for sure. So in his place would step Mike Nelson. head writer and fan favorite for some impressions he did.
Okay.
It was a natural progression, and business continued as usual. The movie would go on to be made.
With him now?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think they had the idea in 93. Joel stepped out in 93. The movie didn't come out until 96 because movies take a long time to happen. Yeah. So he had been host for a little bit, but it was almost like his solidification that he is the new host.
Yeah.
So Mike was head writer. It wasn't like they went out and tapped some host to do it. Mike was entrenched in the system. Fans already liked him because he was doing impersonations of like Jim Morrison was one of the ones he did. Like
okay.
Fans knew who he was.
Okay.
So it felt right to pass the torch. And there's no like bad blood between Joel and Mike. Like
gotcha.
They just understand that that's how it happened. The movie's critical success, but a commercial, It wasn't quite a failure, but it wasn't a flop, but it made its money back. It was a meh. Yeah. It didn't really seem to impact the show either way. Fans who wanted to see the movie had already been watching the show.
Yeah. And
people didn't just go see the movie out of a whim to see the movie.
Without knowing something about it.
Yeah. It just kind of exists. By the mid-90s, Comedy Central was experiencing the success of shows like Politically Incorrect, with soon-to-be hits like South Park and The Daily Show right in the pipeline. It was getting harder to figure out where MST3K fit on the network's increasingly crowded schedule, and in 96 the series was canceled. Aww. So the movie came out and the series was canceled. It was quickly picked up by the Sci-Fi Channel, where its cast and crew soon realized they no longer had the autonomy they had previously enjoyed. So Mallon said, "We didn't cost Comedy Central that much money, and we got a lot of press. So for many years, we had immunity because of that." Sorry. Ultimately, though, the network started getting a sense of who it wanted to be, and that didn't include us in the formulation. Oh. Jim Corbett, who was on the show and then would later voice Crow. Sci-Fi wanted the movies to be more hard sci-fi, which always sounded a little bit risque to me.
Yeah. Hard sci-fi.
The move to sci-fi would really be the last event in the long story of MST3K. So, Sci-Fi basically wanted more control over it.
Yeah.
It lasted for 3 years there.
Oh.
So it lasted a little while, but considering the show had lasted 10-ish years before that, it was a pretty short run in the mainstay of things. What's funny is I prefer Mike to Joel. You kind of get in the MST3K fan base, Team Joel, Team Mike kind of thing.
Yeah, okay.
I prefer Mike because he's a little less dry. Joel's like sleepy thing never really landed with me.
Okay.
Mike seems a little less. Mike is less involved in the character of I'm stranded on a ship or a spaceship, and more in the I'm just gonna make fun of this movie.
Yeah,
and that's what I like about Mike. I get that some people like the character of Joel, and know Joel started it. Joel's the mind behind it, so I totally get that.
But Mike's just like a dude.
Yeah, Mike's just a dude, and I always connected with that. And I think that's kind of what I remember them rerunning on Sci-Fi, because I assume they only reran
their own
what they had.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where my connection to it goes. So in 1999, MST3K aired its 198th and final episode.
Oh no!
198.
They were so close to 200. They couldn't have done two.
I know. Just do 2 more.
Yeah.
A run covering 10 years, several cast changes, 2 different hosts, a movie, and more jokes per minute than just about any other show I've ever seen. MST3K, I think, is so important in the way we do stuff now. So it spawned one of my favorite shows, Cheap Seats, which like no one remembers. So Cheap Seats was a show of Jason and Randy Sklar, twin comedians. And they basically did the exact same thing MST3K did, but no robots, none of that stuff. It was them on a couch on ESPN Classic watching old, terrible sports footage. It's like Wide World of Sports and like just bad regional wrestling and just terrible stuff. And so they would watch it and riff it. And they, of course, credited MST3K for, influencing it. And it was really cool because on their series finale, 3 of the MST3K guys came on and riffed them riffing something as like sort of a tribute during a commercial break. So instead of running a commercial break, they just ran that, which I think is just so cool.
So they had 199 episodes.
A little bit, yeah, I guess so. And if you count the movie, 200.
Yeah. 199 in a movie. That's not too bad.
There you go. That's a good hashtag. I mean, I'm glad it got picked back up. I will admittedly say I've only watched 2 episodes of the new season. When I first got into it, when I really, really got into it, I was in high school. And I think I've seen every episode now.
Really? Okay.
When I was in high school, I used to go to bed by watching MST3K.
Oh, wow.
I would just, like, fall asleep to it. And that was me every night for a year, easily.
Oh, wow.
So, and then, like, in the summer, I'd watch 2 or 3 of them. You know, it was kind of like my podcast. If I was playing a game or whatever, I would just listen to it.
Pre-podcast podcasting.
Yes, exactly. So, like I said, I think I've seen in some capacity every episode. Then basically what happened was that there were basically 2 generations of MST3K.
Okay.
So there was like Mike, Kevin Murphy, and Jim Corbett, and then Joel, Trace, and whoever the third person I mentioned earlier was. So they kind of split into different camps.
So when Joel left, did his 2 guys leave too?
But they would eventually.
Okay.
So Trace stayed around for a little bit. I think Trace stayed around for 1 season with Mike. And the other guy, sorry.
That's all right.
So many names. Not Jim Mallon. Who's the other name?
I remember Tom Servo being my favorite one because he looked like a bubblegum machine.
Oh, yeah. That's what he's made out of.
I liked him. Did he have eyes? He didn't have eyes.
Nope. He was just a
had
bubblegum machine with like a little bird
he
mouth.
He just had a little mouth. I didn't know the other one was named Crow.
Yeah, Crow T-Robot.
I didn't know that.
Josh Weinstein was the other person, sorry.
Weinstein, okay.
So I think Josh might have left with Joel.
Okay.
But I know there's 1 season where Servo sounds like a little different.
Okay.
And that's when it was still Trace.
Oh.
And then Kevin Murphy and Bill Corbett, who were also writers on the show, stepped in to do voices.
Gotcha.
So that camp, sort of the new camp, went on to make a company called Riff Tracks.
Yeah.
And they still exist. They're doing, riffs now. They're basically doing the same thing, but just in audio form. There's no, like, silhouettes.
Yeah.
And then it's actually really cool how they do it because they'll just sell the MP3 track of them riffing something, and then they'll put in a thing that lets you sync it with your copy of the movie.
That's cool.
That way they don't have to buy rights for a movie. So they can do whichever movies they want. It's pretty genius.
Super clever.
So a little bit after this, Joel started his camp of doing stuff like that.
Okay.
They did their own riffing thing. And now I think they're all kind of collaborating again on the new one.
Oh, okay.
But I know Riff Tracks is still very much a thing. I think
That's
the
cool.
new one is very Joel heavy. Because Joel's like executive producer or whatever. And he started the crowdfunding and all that.
So he was cool with it coming back.
Oh, yeah. He was the one who wanted to.
Oh.
He started the crowdfunding.
Oh.
It was his thing.
I figured he was done. Done.
He was 20 years ago. But,
yeah.
You know, 20 years and
money
a
runs
little
out,
less
I guess.
money. Yeah,
money runs
That'll
out.
make you want to come. And no, he seems really passionate about it. I think we can learn a lot from MST3K, especially like as streamers.
Yeah.
Picking up on what you can make fun of in whatever content you're watching,
Yeah.
or just how much your personality can affect what you're viewing.
Yeah.
Because like as people who watch Twitch as much as we stream, I can have completely different experiences of the same game moments depending on who's on the stream, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I think that's something to be picked up from MST3K. Like all this sort of, you don't have to be an asshole. Nobody wants to hang out with an asshole.
Right. Yeah.
It could be funny, but it's not going to last.
Yeah, and I think like the point that you made about them being frustrated and having it come through is also something important for like streaming or where anybody's going to see you. It's like some days you're just frustrated or you're having a bad day, and it's important to be honest with yourself and with your audience that's happening. And I think that's a really honest, nice moment to say like, we were frustrated in the writer's room and that's why we're frustrated in this episode. Right. So like transparency
is always good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even with things like, and they were talking at the end of the big oral history thing about how there was sort of a spawn of generation of riffers. Like, YouTubers are just people doing riffs a lot of the times. These reaction videos or like things like what is that Rob Dyrdek show? Ridiculousness or Tosh.0 or The Soup. Like they're all just riffing in different ways. Of course they weren't the first people to make fun of something that's that's gonna go back as far as things exist. But this specific style I think has shown up more maybe in the past 5 or 6 years than it did the show was really before its time. Yeah. And I think that's sort of a hallmark of the series, and I think it's worth talking about because I don't see a lot of, even though the Netflix revival kind of brought out everybody who's like, yes, I was a fan of this forever. Yeah. I think it's sort of lost among the younger generation. Yeah. Because they don't remember the sci-fi reruns or anything like that. Like I sort of rediscovered it on a fluke, just watching through YouTube one day, and I saw it and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. And then I was watching Cheap Seats and they were in it, and I was like, I have to go back and find this show. And so I hope that more people get into it because of the revival. I would love to see, because as far as I know, none of it is all together somewhere.
Oh,
I don't, like on a streaming service. I mean.
Right.
I'm surprised Netflix doesn't have the rights to it.
Oh, because they just have the new one.
They did when Netflix first started their streaming service. But then at that time, it was like only select ones. It wasn't like full seasons.
Interesting. Okay.
And then Amazon has some that you can buy, but it's not there. There's no compendium, and I want that. That is the one thing I want.
All of it together. Yeah, in one place.
Because a lot of them are on YouTube. Frankly, like it's just one of those things that's going to be. It's going to be hard for them to seize rights on something that they're riffing on rights to. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of a weird chain of command. And so a lot of them are up in like the shorts and different things they would do before a movie or whatever. So it will persist, I think, in some regard. But I would like to see it archived in a better format.
It would be cool. It'd be cool to see like a giant box set of like
that would be really
every
cool.
episode ever.
Because I know there are box sets of like the seasons, but they're ridiculously expensive.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I would love to just have like a Satellite of Love box set that's like a big bone, because that's what the ship looked like. If you didn't know, it looks like a dog bone. And so like that would be awesome, and I that's my one hope to come out of all of this. That would
be fantastic. I remember watching it as a kid and thinking they were so quick and so funny and so smart. And I think the saying, you're watching it with your buddies was completely on brand.
Oh, yeah.
Which that kind of goes back to streaming too, is you want people to feel like they're involved in what you're doing. So
sure.
There's a lot in common with riffing and being pals.
And even the idea of like they created their own community and were very communicative with them and responsive. Yeah. And the same things with streaming. Now, granted, it's in a much quicker capacity than they were. Right. But when even then, they were like, "Hey, reach out to us. Yeah. Here's our information."
Yeah. Like, that's super cool. It's that you can't really do that so much anymore with like a major television show. No. Like you get with that. Plus, it shines some light on some B movies that probably wouldn't have got any recognition whatsoever otherwise.
A cool story that I ran across. Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
There were some people who worked on movies who sent them into them.
Oh, that's cool.
Will you riff it? The most infamous one being Hobgoblins.
Okay.
Which is a terrible movie. It's notoriously bad. If you've never seen it, go watch it in some regard.
And they sent it?
Yeah, the dude who created it was like, please.
Like knew it was bad?
Yeah. And he said like he told his friends and family when it was going to air, but he hadn't seen the cut, of course. And he was like, if I had known how much they were going to dunk on it, I maybe wouldn't have. But he said it was so much fun. He was like, now I'll do like screening parties of their riff of my movie.
Very good.
He said the one thing he hated is that they did, in the credits, they did a fake interview with him. And they had like a cardboard cutout like of this director guy.
What?
And it's like, do you have worms for brains or what? And he hates that line. Like that really
worms for brains?
Yeah, because it's a ridiculously scripted movie. You know how like people will do like cheesy reveal lines in before they'll like try to do red herrings kind of thing.
Yeah.
The name of the town is Nilbog, which is goblin backwards. That shows you the quality of writing in this film. But go watch Hobgoblins; it's great. But then he made Hobgoblins 2 in 2009 because it was such a ridiculous movie and had such a reputation that he could make another one.
I mean, look at like what's the movie with Tommy Wiseau?
The Room.
Look at The Room.
Sure.
Like it's such a bad movie, but look at all of the people that want to watch it.
Yeah.
Because of the reputation it has. So, I mean, they may have opened up doors for people to watch these terrible B movies that wouldn't have watched them otherwise.
Yeah, the first time I saw The Room was the riff tracks of it.
Ta-da!
Yeah. Birdemic was the same way.
Birdemic?
Oh. That's another episode.
I thought we were friends. And I came out to have a good time, and I'm honestly feeling so attacked right now. You just mentioned a bird at me.
Yeah.
I hate birds.
Liddy, where can people find you?
Twitch.tv/Team Liddy. Where can people find you?
Twitch.tv/Dormstreams. I said Werpikipika, by the way.
Werpikipika.
I don't want to let that one go.
You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube.
Yep.
If you're here already watching our stupid faces, hello. We have a merch store. We've got stuff.
Discords.
We have Discords. We have plans and thoughts and dreams and ambitions. You can't have access to those.
Not so much. Yeah, you can't really get.
You can't
get
really
into
have.
those.
You can't have those.
Not really.
They're mine, but you can't have those.
Liddy just brings them in her bag every week.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, I brought my dreams this week.
Yeah, it's a pretty light bag.
Aw.
You made me break character.
No. It was so sad.
I was gonna keep it going.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, thank you. That was a really interesting topic.
Thanks.
That was really cool. I didn't know all that.
I will say, I expected, because when I had the idea for this episode, I expected it to be more like conversational and me sort of talking about how much I love the show. And the more I read about it, I felt like it should be more of a history piece in a way, because it was so interesting. Yeah. So sorry I talked you out of most of the episode.
No, I like that because I didn't know. I had a very minimal basis for information on the show other than I remember it from when I was a kid, and it was funny, and that's pretty much it. But knowing that there's so much backstory to it, and I mean, it's kind of inspirational that he was like, nope, I'm out. Yep. Once he reached that point,
he knew it was bad, and the show. I didn't mention this. The show got canceled after 3 episodes.
What?
So him not taking it was probably the right move, because it got criticized for being a Fast Times at Ridgemont High ripoff, and he said that in his denial letter.
Oh,
so
no.
Pretty cool story.
That's nothing else. That's some BDE right there.
Yeah, for sure.
What are we?
Are we ending on BDE? All right, fine. So until next time.
I didn't have anything else to add.
Watch where you click.
Watch where you click. Let's go. Riff Tracks a movie.
Yeah, let's do it.
Can we verb that? Can you verb that, or is that like a
Well, Riff Tracks is the company. We could riff a movie.
You can. Okay, so you could say you're gonna riff a movie.
We could do that. Legit.
And just like, what would it be? Which one?